Race. Hello again everybody, I'm Phil Liggett with Paul Sherwin. 170 riders assembled for the Elite Professional World Championship here in Verona, this beautiful city of Romeo and Juliet, waiting now to crown the world champion for the 1999 season. And some of the stars are missing, as they are always now at this time of the year, but some of the stars are here as well, and among the favourites, Paul, Frankie Vandenbroucke and Jan Ullrich after an exceptional Tour of Spain.
And Jan Ullrich, after winning the individual time trial championships just a couple of days ago, I reckon Ullrich has to be the #1 favourite, and the whole of the German team here are dedicated to trying to get him the win.
Well, some smiling, some very pensive faces down there. Andrea Schmil soon to defend the final leg of the World Cup in the Tour of Lombardy, just gone off to our left. Andrea Tafi, a lot of pressure will be on him today for the Italian team, the squadron that must perform in front of their own crowd. The pressure perhaps less so on the Dutch and indeed on the pensive face there of Alex Zula. So at 10 o'clock in the morning, they're rolling away. The clock starts now. 260 kilometres, 16 laps of what I think will be a very tough circuit, and judging by the under-23 road race, the women's road race and junior road races we've seen on this same course all week, we're in for a great race.
A very difficult course, 16.3 kilometres around, and every time the riders have the very difficult climb of the Torricelli to go up to, and that reaches a maximum of 283 metres. 16 laps, making it 260 kilometres around here, and certainly it is going to be a war of attrition because the racing will be difficult, especially on the climb. But I have to say, I reckon Jan Ullrich is looking very relaxed on the start line this morning, already having got a world title under his belt, and he's going to be a very difficult man to beat because this is a circuit today for the tough riders.
And if we're going for cockiness, making a real favourite, then we also have to think of Frankie Vandenbroucke. But let's look back to Valkenburg 1 year ago, and this man, after a brilliant road race, coming out a justifiable good winner of the World Championship, Oscar Camenzind of Switzerland, reliving the great moments for a country that's been without a world champion for an awful long time. And since becoming world champion, Camenzind only 2 wins under his belt this season. He of course went on to win immediately the Tour of Lombardy last year. But he's had a good year. 4th in the Flèche Wallonne, 8th in Liège-Bastogne-Liège, and 11th in the Tour of Italy. So now he'll look for a good defence of his title, and he knows what it's all about. The field though, Paul, as we rejoin the race here, the sun has now come up. We're a few laps down the road. There has been no attacks at all, just a nice tempo, and not surprisingly, plenty of the squadra in the lead.
All the riders on the start line this morning fielding 12 men. But in fact the Swiss allowed to field 13 riders because they have the defending champion Oscar Camenzind in their midst, so therefore they can start him as an extra rider, and that will give them a slight advantage going into the final of this race. Alex Zula there riding a pretty good road race so far, but as you can see, very much to the front at the World Championship. Always the French team trying to put the hammer down, trying to keep the race difficult, especially over the summit of the climb.
Well, we've now just started to get a series of attacks here. We're moving on to around 7 laps to go from the finish now, and the pressure has noticeably been applied. Andrea Schmil has been in the action as well, but we can tell you that very early on today at the 6th lap, Frankie Vandenbroucke has crashed. His team dropped back for him, including Johan Museeuw. He's back safely in the pack and seems okay, but one rider out of the race, and rather sadly for the locals, is David Rebellin, because he's crashed and we believe has broken ribs. He's gone to hospital.
You notice a lot of work has been done here as well by the German team. The Germans in a new strip this year wearing blue and white, and in fact a lot of that is really because they're trying to just ride for one man here this afternoon, and that is going to be the sole leader of the team, Jan Ullrich. Tafi now trying to hotten up the pace at the front. Tafi also feels as if he's got very good legs at this end of season.
Well, there's 1 or 2 good ones, as always, on the Italian squad. There's 1 or 2 notables missing, of course, including Marco Pantani, who this time last year was saying how much he wanted to win the world title on this circuit, but having had a very controversial end to his campaign this summer, he's not here. But Tafi is seemingly trying to soften things up a little bit now, Paul, because their man on form is Francesco Casagrande, a man out with a doping suspension until the start of the Tour of Switzerland, which he won, and he's having a great end of term.
He certainly is, but at the moment really all of the pressure has been put on by the French and the German team, trying to make this a very difficult course, trying to harden it up at the most difficult part on the course, which is the climb of the Torricelli.
Well, this is the group that has been steadily building, but it's really not getting anywhere at all away from the main field. The big names are still watching from afar and marking each other nicely, as the chase now is beginning to shut it down a little bit. Just about a minute and a half it was over the top of the Torricelli. This is a climb which takes the riders up to 283 metres above sea level. It starts to bite at around the 170 metres level at San Leonardo and then goes straight up to the top. It's not the steepness of the climb, of course, it's the repetitiveness that one has going over it 16 times, and it does begin to bite.
Well, Andrea Tafi in second position there. That's Ribiera, the Spanish rider, in first position. And this is a pretty serious breakaway. Alex Zuller has managed to get himself up there, as well as Geert van Bont, the Belgian rider. It's interesting to note that Tafi's got into this early breakaway. He feels he's got a great chance of winning here, but what it's done is put a lot of pressure onto the German team, who will have to chase. You can see the Italians in second and third position in the main field there. They're actually riding a defending role at the moment, hoping that the advantage turns towards Tafi.
Looks like Van Bon on the front here for Rabobank. Oh, I shouldn't say that really, because he's for Holland in the World Championship, not for, of course, for his individual team. This is the only time of the year the riders pull on their national team jerseys. Here's the breakdown of that league group, and Zuller was the man that started stirring it up. Tafi spotted it and has gone with him, and this is Andrea Tafi at the back. Remarkable rider, and has developed so much, particularly this last 3 or 4 seasons, as to be a top boy in Italy.
What a great performance by Tafi earlier on in this season, getting that victory in Paris-Roubaix, the race that he loves and the race that he has really dedicated himself to winning over the last 3 seasons. Their advantage now, Phil, over the chasing group is just down to 15 seconds. But interesting to note that the Belgians are riding well here today. They've placed 2 men into this leading group.
And there's the man who has been very active here, Alex Zuller. A remarkable second place on his comeback to the Tour de France, and pushing Lance Armstrong all of the way to his victory in that event, when whenever Lance came out with a stage win, it was Alex Zuller who crossed the line in second place.
And what a different story it might have been if Alex Zuller hadn't lost over 6 minutes on the 3rd or 4th stage over the Passage au Gois, because that really turned the books for Alex Zuller, and that took him out of the race as being a major contender. But he didn't give up, and he fought his way back and came up with second position, which is pretty remarkable when you think of the season that he had the year before and all that involvement with the Festina affair of 1998.
Leon van Bon doing a lot of work here, Paul, to try and shut down this breakaway containing Zuller. The Tavosi, having spent first couple of hours of the coming up to dawn this morning, walking out with little ice buckets up onto the climb, getting in the best position for the day. The town here has been shut down for a week now, and nobody seems to mind at all.
Well, Van Bon, a former medalist at the World Championship today, doing an awful lot of work, because the Dutch camp really, Phil, today think that Michael Boogerd is going to be the favourite, because this certainly is a course that suits him. The leading group of riders now is starting to splinter under the pressure of Alex Zuller on the front of this group here, and certainly it has turned out to be a very difficult climb. It always is at the World Championships, because it's the pace of the riders that really dictates how difficult the course is going to be. And I have to tell you, this course here, the Torricelli, is certainly proving to be a pretty tough mountain.
Well, David Brylance, a little bit of a surprise, but you've got to take your chance in that leading group for the Belgians. As the 170 riders rolled out this morning, the field has already reduced quite drastically, as riders have peeled off at the pits, as they often do at the World Championships. As a very typical start to a World Championship today, a good tempo, but nobody attacking at all, just rolling around the course, getting the feel of the situation. That's changed a lot now, because there's good tempo, and when riders start this looking around, it means they are waiting for an attack. They're getting very twitchy indeed now. Number 21 there is Geert van Bont from Belgium. We've got 2 riders up in this breakaway just at the minute, being driven on all of the time by a very frisky Alex Zuller.
Zuller obviously trying to put the pressure on, hoping that in fact if there is a reaction, it'll come from the main field behind, and he can stay in the front split over the top of this climb. A great performance by Zuller at the moment, riding a very strong race here at the World Championships. But you can see you may be unlucky for Alex, because he's wearing number 13 today.
And also wearing the new Swiss national team strip there, which is quite attractive, as Ribiera, the Spanish rider, up there, second wheel. Just seeing going through the frame there was Andrea Tafi, and sitting at the back here at the moment is Geert van Bont, riding for the Belgians, but his team is in fact a Dutch team, the Farm Freak Team TVM.
The amazing thing about the elite men's race at the World Championships every year is when you look at the races that precede the World Championships, you see the under-23s, you see the women's races, and they always start off very quickly and then slow down towards the end. But in the men's professional road race, it's always the last couple of laps which prove to be the fastest event, the fastest of the event, and very often the fastest of the whole week on the same course used by everybody else.
Well, this is an interesting move by Zuller. Really, one would put him into the group of probably second favourites today, yet he's gone out so early on to try and break this race up. The way the races have been held this year, there are some surprise results possible. Remember Celestino in the Hughes Classic jumping away towards the finish and outwitting some big names. So maybe it's a good move to try and get an early group going, because that is a big field still rolling round behind this breakaway group.
There's a small group coming across there. There's Alex Zuller still setting the pace at the front, but it looked very much to me, in fact, if coming up from behind, Michael Boogerd was leading them in the orange strip of Holland. And there's a Swiss rider with him there as well, and they may well have managed to slip away from the rest of the main field. There is a split going clear off the front of the bunch now, and this could be quite important because some of the big names are moving to the front.
Well, Zuller is looking around here. He's riding with Dave Brylance, but they're all over him now because Boogerd has got across as they come up towards the top of the Torricelli yet again. This is a useful looking group. Well, I was about to say a group, but it looks as though the whole peloton has crossed the gap here. Pascal Richard just passing through our screen as well. A big year for him next year when he has to defend the Olympic Championship in Sydney, assuming, of course, he gets selected by Switzerland.
There you can see that looked as if that was a serious move happening, but everybody very nervous at this stage of the World Championships, everybody being very attentive. Just going through there was in fact Jan Ullrich riding very close to the front. I caught a quick glimpse there of Frank Vandenbroucke with his blonde hair going through there, but this now is the start of the descent off the Torricelli, and a very rapid descent as well.
Rapid and quite a tricky one too, and you see that the leaders of that group there try to keep the pressure on to see if they can break up this rather big bunch.
Already one or two riders going out of the back because of the pressure on the front of the climb, and all that pressure was being made there by Alex Zuller. Now it's the turn of the Squadra Azzurri, the Italians, to come to the front and try and do something in this event. The Italians have had a pretty successful week with a win in the men's under-23 championship, and what a great performance that was as well. The Italians were looking to win on home soil, and if they could win the big one at the end of the week, the race that we're looking at today, then they would go home a very happy nation.
Well, I think they do need a result here, Paul, because yeah, you're right about the under-23, but in all the other events this week they haven't had much luck at all. And to talk to some of the riders, the wrong Italian won the under-23 event. He was a man that broke away early on, they never caught him. But now Andrea Tafi tried to get something going here, and this man reminds me quite often of the retiring Claudio Chiappucci this year, because he's never afraid to attack Andrea Tafi, and he's gone out in front to see just what happens, and here he goes again.
He wants to move, he wants to get into that early breakaway and take the pressure off himself, and then not being forced to play the defensive role. Another Italian getting into the group there as well, Sergio Barbero. Two Italians now getting themselves into a leading group of four, but there, Phil, is the main field. Nobody is going to let Tafi get 30 or 40 seconds up the road, because they know he is such a strong rider, and on a course like this he's capable of staying away for 30 or 40 kilometres.
Well, they're not going to give him any room at the moment as they start to chase him down the mountain here and then gradually try and regroup. This is an interesting looking group that's getting itself together now, but Tafi seems to be the man. He's the captain of the Squadra, and he's trying to get something set up because he knows they can't carry some of these names to the finish, least of all Jan Ullrich. And we haven't seen anything at all of Frankie Vandenbroucke really since his crash when he was brought back into the field.
Chance there just to see a group of stragglers who are now round about ready to call it a day here at the World Championships, more than 3 minutes behind, but the pressure is certainly on at the front. But again, you see today, Phil, the Dutch are being very attentive. They're trying to keep themselves in close contact, trying to make sure that nothing gets off the front and puts them into a situation where they have to play a defensive role. There's Rolf Sorensen moving forward too, today riding for Denmark.
Another attack here from Alex Zuller, goes over the shoulder of Maarten den Bakker. And this is the second time Zuller has launched an attack. He caused a little bit of consternation with the last one, and he's gone again now. He's being chased here by Rolf Aldag. Aldag, the workhorse for, the very faithful workhorse too, of Jan Ullrich. Rides on the same team as him, as well as being of the same nation. And he's got himself onto the tail of Alex Zuller.
Zuller really being very aggressive, surprisingly enough, attacking on the flattest part of the course here. But as one or two countries have different jerseys this year. In fact, this is the new strip as well for the Spanish team going to the front. It looked very much as if that was Garcia Acosta trying to get himself off the front, but again, shadowed by the Italians. This is obviously the Italian tactic today, to make sure that they have a man in at least every move that is going up the road.
And Garcia Acosta had a great Tour of Spain this year in the colours of Banesto. Banesto refound themselves in the Vuelta and were in the thick of the action. It was an excellent Tour of Spain, and I hope you'll all enjoy watching that one. But we're looking down now at the Elite Men's World Championship, over the halfway point, and still no decisive moves whatsoever here, because a lot of riders seem to have the measure of one another. And I have to say, Paul, that the Italian squad don't seem to have the grip on this race like we've seen in the past.
Certainly not the big Squadra Azzurri as it has been in the past. In fact, looking to the front there's an American rider. It looks like that must be Chann McRae. The American team not as strong as it has been at the World Championships in the last few years, but today, under the influence of the team manager Jim Okovitz, who's in the American team car driving there, he will certainly try and get them to do the best that they can. It is a shame that the World Championships, I feel, is held nowadays in October, because some of the great riders from the middle of the season, riders like Lance Armstrong, feel that it's not possible to keep the season going long enough, and they in fact pull out of the international circuit before the end of the season. So I don't feel nowadays that the World Championships has a full representative of all the best riders in the world.
Well, the season is long and hard now for the riders, and they're chasing world ranking points all of the time, and I don't think it is now physically possible to stay on top form for the year. Of the 8 Americans starting today, Paul, by my reckoning now, there's only 2 of them left in. You're right, one is Chann McRae, who's having a great end of term, and also Levi Leipheimer is also in this group.
Wilfred Peters moving to the front there, the fantastic Belgian rider, one of the best domestiques on the circuit, rode a great Paris-Roubaix this year, again in a defensive role for the Mapei squad, and again taking them to a 1-2-3 in that great race in Roubaix Stadium.
Well, there's Chann McRae now trying to get in amongst it here. This is looking like another decisive attack, and Chann is carrying it on. Well, he's full of confidence, is Chann McRae. He had a wonderful Tour of Spain, and look at this now, trying to go clear. He's sort of grown up in the same parallel as Lance Armstrong. Lance has come up with the big results. Chann, in his own way, is still developing, and I think there's an awful lot in this young rider.
It certainly is. He's a great talent. He's just had a very good finish to the Tour of Spain, but today he's looking to try and put his name right up in the highlights. But that attack came to nothing. And moving forward now, wearing number 98, the man everybody expects to ride well for Spain. That's Odriozola, leading them round the corner.
It's amazing how things have turned around. When Eddy Merckx retired in Belgium, there's been a 20-year or 30-year dearth of cyclists, but we've only just lost Miguel Indurain into retirement for Spain, and they produced a whole succession of bike riders. They won the time trial this week for the first time with Gonzalez, and now they're at the front of the frame again today.
Mark Wouters there. This is in fact Andrea Tafi trying to organise the riders at the front of the group. Tafi is so certain he's going to get himself into a successful breakaway today that he's going after everything that moves. Now here's the man you were saying you hadn't seen very much of, Van Bont, moving to the back, picking up some bottles for Frank Vandenbroucke, who wasn't too far away from him.
Well, that's interesting to see that Vandenbroucke still waiting to see how this race develops. Still a long way to go. The riders just settling in, but now they know they can forget all the shadow boxing now into the serious part of the World Championships, where only the strongest will survive the next couple of laps, and then the thinking will start again as to how to outwit those who have made the first selection.
Leading group of riders on the climb again in this group, Andrea Tafi. Max Chiandri there riding for Great Britain as well, very happy to be on a circuit like this, not too far away from his own home of Tuscany.
It looks as though Geert Van Bont, after that early escape with Zuller, is having a bit of bother at the back of this race now, and so too is the Danish rider Lars Mikkelsen, also slipping gently off the back. This is pressure time on the Torricelli.
The pressure coming from Switzerland. Switzerland on the front today, really with a great chance of a double, the defending champion Oscar Camenzind, who is coming towards good form at the end of this season. He may well be able to come up with the goods, but they're not letting anybody really get too far up the road at the moment, And this leading group once again is about to be brought back into the fold.
Well, Dmitri Konyshev is the Russian cyclist who's got himself into this group. The Swiss boys are really applying the pressure here. Whether Alex Zula has said, look, let's keep going what he started, or whether this is a plan to try and put Camenzind into a good position at the end. Maybe Zula was just sent out there as a super domestique today and has got no intention of finishing the race.
Could well be the situation. Oscar Camenzind and all the Swiss riders will have had a word this morning in the meeting, and they will know just exactly how they're riding. A glimpse there at the back of the field of Gorazd Stangele, the rider from Slovenia. One of a new group of Slovenian professionals is Daniel Nardello at the front.
Zberg of Switzerland is the man hurting them here at the front, and again kicking once more. This man is a good sprinter. If he gets to the finish to use it, he wipes up a lot of sprints, bunch sprints along with his brother Macus.
Could be a family affair coming down to the finish. If there's a group of 25 or 30 riders left at the World Championships, I'm pretty sure that Marcus Zberg will be there, and that would give him a good crack at getting a victory. He's a very good sprinter.
Looking over his shoulder, it's just over the top of this climb where it really hurts. The last 2 kilometers is when it climbs up to its height and hurts a little bit. And there's Oscar Camenzind, you see. It looks like Casagrande is with him. So there's a couple of favourites now beginning to feel the time is right to start thinning out the big bunch at the front. And Casagrande, who came with a very solid win in the Tour of Switzerland and then was bitterly disappointed when his team were not allowed into the Tour de France, and now being listed as the man on the Italian squad to possibly take the rainbow jersey.
It's a very early move, though, to go out on this course and put this kind of attack in. There's still an awful long way to go to the finish, and Camenzind has decided he's going to go out, but a lot of work has been done to set this up by the Swiss. Coming across now, Maarten Pediguero, Spanish rider, onto the back, but the big tempo is being made on the front by Francesco Casagrande, and they have opened up a serious gap. Now I'm surprised to see the rest of the field, especially the Dutch, allowing a man like Casagrande to get away on the slopes of this climb.
Well, they've got to mark him. All the other boys in blue noticeable by their absence now that their leader has gone up into the fray. There's the confirmation of that leading group. And 2 likely favourites here. What a season Mark Wouters is having, Paul. Despite the blip when he crashed in the Tour de France and hurt himself, he continued his good form as soon as he made his return.
A great season for him, really, because he's been one of those riders who's been around for an awful long time, a very good domestique, worked hard for the team, and it all seemed to start early this year in the Preux Tour when he got a victory there. He left the Preux Tour, went across to the Tour of Luxembourg and came away with a victory there. But strange to see, in fact, it was a Belgian on the front of the main field who was nailing back that group, and I would have sat back and left the advantage to Mark Wouters, who I reckon is in pretty good form at the end of this season.
It doesn't seem to make sense. Mark Wouters himself, a Belgian, often thought of as a Dutchman, by the way, because he races on a Dutch team and with a name like Wouters, but even so, today we're looking for him in the blue of Belgium.
Chann McRae jumping across the gap there, trying to make sure that he doesn't get caught out. Basically, McRae here having to ride very much on his own and watch the tactics of the big nations present, the nations like Switzerland, Belgium and Italy. He's having to watch and see just exactly which way they're playing their tactics and try and ride across to stay with the front split, because he's got no chance of getting a team around him if he misses out on one of the moves.
Well, the Swiss man scurrying through on the inside, Mauro Gianetti. The Swiss are playing a real part in this World Championship, inspired obviously by Camenzind's victory last year. As now still the boys here. This is Jerome, no it's not, it's Michael Boogerd, and he said Jerome Blijlevens, but it's Michael Boogerd who's also come up to the front here. He's got a one last chance of winning the World Cup in the Tour of Lombardy against Andre Schmil, because it looks like being a 3-horse race with Vandenbroucke also in with a chance there if the dice falls in the right order at the finishing line.
It's going to be a very exciting end of the season for the World Cup, and it's been a magnificent World Cup this year. At the moment, though, Vandenbroucke very comfortably in the main field. In fact, it was Vandenbroucke, I think, who put the pressure on at the front of that group to nail back the group with Wouters in there.
I'll tell you what, Paul, the new colours of Spain, to me, I start seeing German cyclists down there now, which is a bit confusing. Very similar to the old German colours. But even so, a lot of Spanish riders in this league group, and clearly they're on a high.
It is strange, several countries changed their colours this year. In fact, the Germans not riding in their normal strip, they're riding in a blue and white strip.
Yep.
And this Italian strip here also is very confusing when it's up against the German team strip as well.
and that's the Belgian strip, not to be confused with the Italian strip. Now what's going on here? We've got a plot. This is David Rebellin. This is earlier, in fact. This was the crash by Rebellin. He fell very, very heavily in the early stage of the race after some 70 kilometers only. Clearly in pain. They put him back on his bike, but I can tell you he didn't continue. In fact, he went to hospital.
He won't be too happy with that either, because he's a local rider. In fact, he hails here from Verona and felt that this was a great possibility of him pulling on the Arc-en-Ciel jersey at the end of a very long stage. He won't be doing that today, and all he can hope now is that it's going to go to one of the other riders in the Squadra Azzurri.
Well, that's really sad, but then this professional cycling game isn't all fairy tales, and they can't all be happy endings like Lance Armstrong's winning the Tour de France. But we wish David Rebellin the best of luck, and you'll probably be watching and cheering for an Italian winner anyway in the next couple of hours of racing here in the World Championship. Well, another flurry of attacks has come to nothing, Paul, and this field is still some 60 strong. The average now just dipping for the first time below 41. It's about 40.8 kilometres an hour now, and that's a signal for Serpellini to have a go.
Well, this is a bit strange. The Italian tactics really aren't as what they normally are at the World Championships. They normally try and make sure that they have a group of 8 or 10 riders going clear with a couple of Italians in, and at the moment they're sending off an awful lot of attacks one at a time to try and go off the front of this group, trying to toughen the race up, and you can see they have done that, because there are not an awful lot of the 170 riders who started this race left in the race at the moment.
A little bit of Paris-Roubaix under the wheels here. That bell, by the way, is a spectator on the right-hand corner. It's not the last lap, unfortunately, for the riders. Just under 5 hours of cycling now, and a packed town here as they see the big riders go through. This is, of course, the highlight in Italy of the whole week of racing down here. And now the Italians are bound to be seen in the action, and that looked very much like Mr. Tafi again.
Well, it was. Tafi's gone out again. Tafi's certainly looking for the big move here today. He's attacked so many times already. I just don't know where he gets the energy and the enthusiasm to launch himself off the front of this pack. But he is racing on home turf. He's racing in front of an Italian crowd, and you can see a lot of anguish on many faces towards the back of that long line of riders there.
Well, you can never keep this man suppressed for very long. He rode an absolutely magical Paris-Roubaix with attack after attack, which gave him victory in the end. Will it happen today? He's been close in World Championships, but he's never got the medal he wanted. Yet.
Kurt van der Wouwer on the front for Belgium there, keeping the pace high. They today also have one sole lead, and that's Frank Vandenbroucke, surrounded by some very experienced riders. Men like Johan Museeuw, men like André Schmeel, who will be doing everything to try and help the young Belgian hopeful.
Well, the field again looks as though it's all thinking out the next move. There's so many men of equal ability, or equal form I should say, at this time of the year. And the names that we've talked about, like Ullrich and Vandenbroucke, we still haven't seen do anything more than just close the gaps and sit there. No attack from them yet. They're letting everybody fire their shells first.
Those guys, the big names, the men who expect to win this race, will leave it all up to their teammates for the moment. They will leave it all to their teammates to do the pacemaking at the front. We're on the 13th lap now of 16 laps. And still Andrea Tafi feels that this could be the chance for him, and what a season that would be, Paris-Roubaix and the World Championships. But behind they're going to have to start to get themselves organised, because you can't give Andrea Tafi too much of a lead on a course like this, because he doesn't weaken. He can just keep riding at the same pace all of the time.
Well, this is when he's brilliant over the beautiful river Adige there in the centre of Verona. Now they're having to think this one through a little bit more. Certainly there'll be no reaction coming from the Italian rider on the front there, Gianni Falazin, as he rides up alongside Alex Zula, who's been a real animator in the race so far, but hasn't got him anywhere at all. Well, I suppose it has. It seems to at last have reduced the field to around about 60-65 cyclists there. Tafi is a great time trialist. Once out of sight, he'll go, and he'll never slow down. They'll have to come to him, because he'll never come back to them.
This is the hardest part of the course, in fact, to open up an advantage, because these are long, big boulevards through Verona, and then they go out onto the course and they reach the town of San Leonardo, and then they climb up to 280 meters from the summit of the Torricelli. There's a chance now to see the Germans riders coming up to the front. This is Rolf Aldag, the man who really is always on hand when Jan Ullrich needs him. All of the Germans today putting an awful lot of effort into making sure that there are no serious attacks, because I reckon Jan Ullrich has got a great chance on a course like this coming down to the last couple of laps, but we won't see the big names until 2 laps to go, I don't think, on the final slopes of this climb.
Then in that case we must assume that Tafi here is trying to just soften them up in favour of Casagrande. Also Gianni Farazin is back in that group, and Marco Velo is there too. They've still got some plenty of the boys in blue back there, but it's becoming a 4 or 5 nation contest once again, with the Spanish, the Swiss, the Belgian, the Dutch and the Italian, and I suppose I should mention the French because I've noticed Brochard down there, and also Jean-Cyril Robin.
Well, the French have not been as aggressive as they normally are in World Championships. Normally the French tactics coming through to the Worlds is always to launch attack after attack on the slopes of the climb that every World Championship seems to have. But this year they seem to be playing much more of a waiting game, leaving it up to the Swiss, who seem to be fairly certain this year that they've got a great chance of victory, either from Oscar Camenzind or from Marcus Zberg, if they can get a big bunch down to the finish line, because Zberg is a very good sprint finisher, and I think that's another reason why we've seen a very omnipresent Swiss team at the front of this bunch.
Well, Peter Farazin is the rider leading at the moment for Belgium, just got passed by his teammate there, and not to be confused with Gianni Farazin, because he's Italian, and he certainly won't be chasing his team captain right now, otherwise he will get an earful when he brings him back. But Andrea Tafi is just going to stay out there and see what happens now as we head towards the last 2 laps of the course, and he's about 45 kilometres from the finish here, which is not that far away, 28 miles or so to race. He's forged himself a lead of 45 seconds. It's the Belgians who are having to chase, so clearly Vandenbroucke is in there and having no problems with his accident very early on today. So it's their job to keep this race in contention. It's a chance for the Italian squadra to have a little rest behind and think what they're going to do with Casagrande. The thing is, the Italians are always the team to beat at every World Championship, but of course today it's on their own country turf. Then they're going to find it very tough to shake off these riders.
They're obviously very worried about this move, because look at that now, 4 Belgian riders moving up to the front, and a couple of those Belgian riders are probably going to be Mape riders as well. Wilfried Peters could still well be in the action, as Johan Museeuw is as well, and normally they would ride alongside Andrea Tafi, but at the World Championships everybody rides for their respective nation, and they do have to chase down riders who on other occasions actually come from the same trade team.
Another one up there in second wheel at the moment, Kurt van der Wouwe, who had a wonderful Tour de France also this year for Lotto. One day they might have a winner there.
Mark Wouters up in second place with the orange helmet of Rabobank, but Tafi's having a hard time on this climb. The crowd are going absolutely crazy because they'll be getting all of the information. It's wild at the World Championships because all of the people at the side of the road here have small portable televisions that they can watch when the riders go out for the rest of the loop, and they come up alongside the road to watch them go past live before turning their faces back to the monitor and really living the whole race live.
Tafi, a popular person with the Tifosi, although he's only won 2 races this year. He always features heavily in them, as we watch Peter Farazin set the pace here now, determined to get this race back up to the back wheel of this man here, and he's riding absolutely superbly is Andrea Tafi, and I'm sure being cheered all the way by his wife Gloria and his 2 children as they watch Dad on the telly.
Tafi is such a tough rider, a very strong man, always willing to attack, and it's surprising after so many attacks today that he's managed to get himself off the front, but he's not really building on the lead. If he's going to try and succeed a move like this, he should be really looking to open up a gap of 2 to 3 minutes at the moment, but you can see the Belgians have decided we're working for Vandenbroucke. There's a first glimpse there in about 6th position of Jan Ullrich, and not too far away also Francesco Casagrande was there.
Well, these are absolutely crucial moments now in any World Championship when you're on towards the last 2 laps. You can't afford now to not be with the move that goes. They know the move is going to come. Tafi surely doesn't dream of staying out there for the rest of this race. His best finish in the World Championships is 6th, which he did in 1996, and on that year he really could have so easily have been the win, but that indeed went to Johan Museeuw.
Chance there to see the little earpiece in the ear of Andrea Tafi. Nearly all of the teams now, all the top teams in the world, using some kind of 2-way communication to get information from the team managers in the car, which I think does make it a little safer. Well, there's Wilfried Peters, and that's a shame. He's done his work for the day. He really is a tough domestique, always prepared to work for the team. He'll be going to take an early shower now, get the TV turned on in the hotel room, and just keep his fingers crossed for Vandenbroucke.
strong man has done his job and hopes that Vandenbroucke can now finish it off. He's in that lead group. Well, the lead group I suppose is correct, because the one man at the front hardly constitutes a group, but there they are. As we continue on, you've got a good idea there of how long this climb is. It's some 4 kilometres and gets tougher towards the top. Pace being set here by Dave Brylontz, who's actually ridden very well, but there's trouble here for Mark Wouters, Paul. It looks like he's given up.
Difficult ride for Wouters. He was at the front a few moments ago, really giving it the full energy, trying to make sure that they could pull back Andrea Tafi. But you see, each of these teams today has decided, and it's a very risky thing to do, to invest in just one man. The Germans are investing everything in Jan Ullrich. The Belgians have decided we have got only one man to ride for today, and that's Frank Vandenbroucke. And what's happening is the teams are starting to become isolated, and towards the end we're going to see a very small group, I think, of riders with just the big names there.
Well, they're selling their men. Peters has gone, Wouters has gone, 2 great domestiques and hard workers. They've done their bit and blown away. Now it's left to Germany to set the pace here, and Switzerland not far away either. They're still looking very strong, the Swiss.
Well, Tafi had a maximum lead of over 45 seconds, but now it's starting to come down pretty rapidly, and it's all because of the tempo being set at the front of the main field on the slopes of this climb. You can see now that they've sent up some Germans to the front, and the Belgians now starting to disappear away from the front of that pack.
We've got Zberg right up there for Switzerland now. He's just waiting to see what happens here now. Andrea Tafi is just keeping his same speed up, but there's so much pressure going on behind. Looking down that line, there's still a lot of riders in contention for this race, and they're bringing Tafi back as a group and not as individuals, and that wasn't quite the plan for Tafi. There they all are here, and some fine pacemaking being done up the slopes here by the German rider.
Very close in attention, Switzerland, but Tafi over the summit of the climb is still holding on. He's still managing to survive despite the fact there's an incredible pace in the main field behind, and there is the main field almost on his tail at the moment. But the speed that we've come up the climb this time, Phil, I have to say, has got rid of several riders out of the back of the group.
Well, the German, Paul, I think is Andreas Kleyer, who's done a tremendous piece of pacemaking to get those riders across. He sits up there and zips up his jersey. Tafi looks over his shoulder, must wonder where on earth they came from towards the end of that climb, but they're right on him now, and he's still, you see, going to dangle out there in the vain hope that somebody might just nip across the gap.
But now what is happening is the whole of the main field is coming past Andrea Tafi, but he has put a lot of pressure onto this bunch now, and a lot of riders will be gasping for breath. And this is the moment now, if you've got a little bit left in those legs, to launch the counter-attack. But I think everybody for the moment feels pretty happy to kick back and have a little bit of a respite before we go into the final couple of laps, because that is when the big decisions are going to be made.
Well, in fact, it wasn't Andreas Kleyer, it was Andreas Clouden, who was the rider who did all of the work to bring back that lead group, and he's still up at the front now as they come flipping over the top. And the Lamprey rider there, Sir Marco Serpellini for Italy, also in that group as well. So a good piece of work by Tafi. Has to have hurt a lot of men, that.
Another big group of riders.
What's
out
this?
to the
Where
back.
is he now?
Tafi has decided that he's going to keep going. He's not sitting up. He's decided to go out on the attack again. This is unbelievable. This guy, I think he must be mad, because he really has got to get out there after an incredible breakaway like that. He's put the hammer down again and said, right, I'm going to do it one more time, and this time they've let him go again.
Well, he's 33 years of age now. He turned professional back in 1989, Andrea Tafi. Started slowly, but since then he's picked up something like 26 victories as a pro, but he's certainly shaped a lot of race results as well. Look, he started to open the gap again now, and the riders in this group must be feeling pretty annoyed about that.
Except the Italians riding very close to the front. They'll be happy with that, because it's taking the pressure off the Italians. Sitting very close to the front was Francesco Casagrande, and what they want Tafi to do is keep the pressure on like this, because this will in fact then take a lot of pressure off them. They won't have to do any chasing at all, and the big leaders for Italy can sit back and leave the other teams to do all of the pacemaking. But Tafi, what a great performance. He really is a star rider. When he's on form, he wants to go out and attack, and that really is a rider from the old era of cycling, before people calculated down to the last minute second. Tafi just wants to go out there and race.
He does, and he loves to please the public. We've seen him entertain the British when he won the Rochester Grand Prix a couple of years ago, which was then a World Cup event. He's also been the national champion of Italy, which for an Italian is a very proud occasion. and he's won big races like the Tour of Lombardy and Paris-Brussels, so he knows what success is all about, but he's still not afraid to go out and make the race for somebody else. At the moment, he's doing it for the rest of the Italian squadron. There's Chann McRae down there. I think he is now the only American left in the event. I think Levi has gone off now, Levi Leipheimer. And so it's a very, very privileged group down there just now.
Interesting to note, just going down the main field there, Phil, there's an awful lot of Italians still left in this bike race. Despite the withdrawal of Davide Rebellin after that unfortunate crash to him in the early part of the event today, there is still a big number of Italians. So this is really working to their advantage because it's putting pressure on the other teams. A lot of Germans have disappeared from that group. They've all been sacrificed today by Jan Ullrich, and I can only count about 4 German jerseys left in this group here. So already Jan Ullrich is starting to be isolated, and he's going to have to respond to a lot of attacks in the latter part of this race, which I'm sure if we do catch back Andrea Tafi is going to come from the Italian squad.
Yeah, he's going to have to look for the right train, Ullrich, rather than make it obvious he's got the legs, because they know his form. They saw him in the time trial a couple of days ago, but they don't know how much effort he's given away in that time trial to win the gold medal, of course, but also the way he won the Tour of Spain this year. Strong in the mountains as well. He's going to have to wait, read the race and go with what should be a compact little group towards the end. As we're running down now towards the last 2 laps of the circuit, a little bit of word of advice here. Jean-Cyril Robin in this lead group as well, while at the front another attack going again. Now this is Marco Velo. Always love that name when you're a cyclist. And now through the pits, not taking any food on board. This is another attack by the Azzurri.
What a great move. They really are on the attack now. They're racing on home turf. And in fact today, for the first time as the team manager for France, is Charlie Berard, the rider who for many years rode for the Castorama team and the System U team, a great man who's looked after the French juniors and developed them for many years, and he's now moved in to replace Charlie Motte, who resigned his position as the team manager. 5 hours and 10 minutes in the saddle, and you can see, Phil, that it really is starting to crack up a lot now, and you can see a lot more presence of Italian jerseys towards the front of this bike race.
Well, there's your average speed of 40.7 kilometers an hour, so the pace is being maintained here. 5 hours and 10 minutes. We'll be just on 6 hours for the full distance, as the field now start to try and get on terms with Marco Velo, who is the time trial champion of Italy, by the way. A very good man against the watch.
Well, this is a good move here. There's a group of about 8 riders going clear and 3 Italians in that group, and I think Francesco Casagrande was just on the back. The reaction though coming from Michael Boogerd, who's seen the danger, and the Belgian rider in there is the old Grand Master himself. I reckon Mr. Classics of the 1990s, Johan Museeuw.
Yeah, a brilliant bike race reader. You do a lot worse than to follow his wheel around the bike race. That's of course, Paul, if you can keep up with him, because even though he's aging now, he can still read a bike race to absolute perfection.
And what a man. He too is one of the bike riders of the old days. He's a real tough man, ready to race in any kind of conditions, and it must have been very strange for him this year to come back to Paris-Roubaix, a race that almost cost him his life last year.
Another Italian got to the front to conjure with as well. Now Mauro Zanetti is up here too, so that's interesting, because now we're getting some new names. This is Marco Velo. Zanetti's on his wheel. This is a big push now by the boys in blue, and in fact our motorbike only just got out the corner first there, as we're getting quite a little selection coming forward now. This is still the Spanish guy Rubira. He's been very active today.
Spanish jerseys have been fairly active to the front of this race this afternoon, but they've not really been dominant. They've just been present, just hanging fire and letting the big teams like the Swiss and the Italians and the Belgians make the pace making. But this is a pretty good move now. 3 Italians in this leading group, and behind really the Belgians and the Dutch are going to have to respond. I did see the response coming from Michael Boogerd, but I'm not sure yet whether he managed to get himself across to the leading group.
Well, the Italians are riding extremely well now. They're doing everything right at the moment. They've used their man Tafi to soften up the field, and now they're trying to make it feel worth his while for that attack by packing the men to the front and get some decisive split going. Sitting at the back here, Frank Vandenbroucke. I really would not expect him to be at the back at this stage, Paul. He should be looking for the split now.
Well, he should be riding much closer to the front, unless he's going to take the risk of moving to the front only on the climbs. He will hope that that's where the major attacks are going to happen, but it is always a very risky thing to do, to sit at the back like this, because you can get caught up in an accident. He's already been in one crash this afternoon, and another one of the Italians is abandoning, so that is surprising. Sergio Barbero, but he was very dominant in the early part of this race, making it a tough event.
Well, they've lost a man there as he comes off, and he's going to have a little chat with the Rye network, I think, down there as to why he's pulled out. He'll probably tell everybody he's done his job. There's a Belgian guy also, that's Mark Wouters. We saw Mark go off on the climb. He's reported into the pits now as another man, and an awful lot of riders have been coming into these pits in the last half hour. In fact, somewhere in the region of 50 riders have abandoned the race.
It's all because of the pressure on the front, and it's been very much a very heavy tempo every time we've gone up the climb of the Torricelli. You can see again the big reaction in the main field, and it's the German riders, and again it's Andreas Kloden on the front there. You see, look at that though, Vandenbroucke sitting there nice and comfortably, allowing everybody else to make the pace, and he's moved very quickly to the front, from the back to the front, in the period of around about 100 meters.
It's good to see too Raimundus Rumsas riding there, halfway down the field, the Lithuanian. This is a very, very select group we're seeing now, Paul, and still there's a proliferation of riders from Italy and indeed from Switzerland and from Spain and from Belgium. The big nations.
The big nations, they always fire when it comes to the World Championships, but the biggest squad with the biggest morale every time they come to the Worlds is the Italians, which is why after that group was caught, another Italian is launching himself off the front here.
Great attacking riding. This is Farazin now having a go. And they're wonderful the way they do this, where attack after attack to try and break up the race. It just shows you the quality of the riders with them though, because attack as they may, they're still pulling an awful lot of riders along in this group behind.
Well, now the Italians have decided they've had enough of the early part of the race, had enough of the scene setting. They want to get out there now and really put the hammer down. They've had several attacks. That was a good move just recently with 3 Italian riders getting into it, but they still want to launch the attacks. They still want to get out off the front.
This looks like, I was going to say it looks like Glenn Magnusson. We don't usually see him in his Swiss colours, of course. He's about to lead the US Postal team this year for a new squad next year. Nice attack from him. It looks as though it's all coming steadily back together again. Magnusson, normally a sprinter, specialising in winning a stage, at least one, in the Tour of Italy whenever he rides it. This was the odd year out for him. Alex Zuller again has gone, and Alex is so impressive when he starts. And look at the gap he's opened this time, and of course the Italians are trying to react.
Well, they're not reacting at all. They've just sat up because they cannot follow the pace of Alex Zuller. That was a great move. He waited for the attacks to come, and as soon as they slowed down, he came right up to the back wheel of Magnusson, straight by him, and he really has got the real coup de pédale today, the real stroke of the pedal. He's flicking it over nice and easily, and he's opening himself up a very smart gap. Now, this is surprising because Alex Zuller did an awful lot of work in the early part of this race, but I reckon today he feels he's on good form. The reaction coming from France, and that looks like Jean-Cyril Robin.
Indeed it is, and some 230 kilometres now under the wheels of these survivors, and I think that's the name of the game now, because an awful lot of riders have thrown in the towel. Well, he's gone after Alex Zuller, Robin, and it looks as though he's going to join him on the climb. Now this, I think, is going to be one of the last attacks. The others are going to have to try and follow.
Let's put a real cat amongst the pigeons. There's 2 Swiss riders very close to the front there, but this will be ideal for a man like Marcus Berg, the sprinter on the Swiss squad, because he can sit back now and just leave the advantage to their man at the front. Jean-Cyril Robin at the front, in fact, now has made contact with Alex Zuller, and these are 2 very good riders, especially for this part of the course. But look at the gear that Zuller is using, a very small gear, ticking over the pedals there on the slopes of this climb, and already they're building themselves up a pretty serious move. I think the Belgians have put too much work in too soon, and they have actually disappeared from the front of this group, but it's up to the Italians to in fact come up and take the chase. There's Frank Vandenbroucke looking very comfortable there, moving to the front for the first time. On his shoulder there, Peter van Petegem, and the reaction has come from the Italians because they are the ones who are in dominant numbers in this race now, Phil, and Marco Velo has been sent to the front for Italy to chase down the 2 leaders.
Well, Robin rode extremely well in the new race, the Trans-Canada race this year, which slipped onto the international calendar and before hardly anybody knew it. Attracted a lot of big names, and he also finished 2nd overall in that event. And now he's got himself with that form into what could be a decisive move here. Zuller, who's been playing around with lone attacks all day, is still on the attack now, and time is running out for the others.
Alex Zuller really having a great end of the season, although his Tour of Spain was not so fantastic. He has proved that he has got himself into ideal conditions for the World Championships, which is being defended by Switzerland, as Oscar Camenzind was the man who won this title last year. and he's still in with a very good chance of winning again this year. They're at an advantage now, 12 seconds over the group, and the group being led very much by the Italians, who certainly want to bring this race back together, because in the group they've still got Francesco Casagrande, who many think is the #1 favourite there. That was Marco Velo on the front, putting the pressure on, trying to pull it all back together, but the race now is becoming much more tactical.
And the Italians are again on the receiving end here as they try to move up. Number 96 there was Martin Pereguero, and he's a Spanish rider. There's a few Spanish riders still in this lead group here as they now decide what they're going to do. Number 8 is Felice Puttini, the Swiss rider, and number 20 there is Andre Schmil. He's probably thinking of his upcoming Tour of Lombardy and the defence of the World Cup. It would be nice to go into that race though wearing the rainbow jersey, I'm sure about that. And Laurent Brochard on the right as well, and the Italian rider there is Farazin. This is a very select group of some good names, but what can they do about this attack? This is going to be a tough climb this time up. These two are sailing up it, but all of the work being done by Zula, at least when our cameras go there. I've not seen Robin in the lead since he hooked up with Alex Zula.
Although I do have to say, Jean-Cyril Robin looks very comfortable there, sitting very nicely on the wheel of Alex Zula, riding perfectly, sitting well back on the saddle, nice and powerful, keeping himself in an ideal position. He's coming to the front now as they get towards the summit of this climb, but he does look relaxed and he does look in good condition. And I have to say that race across Canada obviously did him an awful lot of good, because he's come here with good condition. He was very unlucky to lose the Trans-Canada race. In fact, it went down to the final time trial. Having led the race for an awful long time, he had to bow out because of his inability to put in a good performance at the last minute.
And we must not forget, of course, last year when he rode for US Postal, he finished 6th in the Tour de France, slipping into the result there, hardly noticed. And so Robin is a quality rider. He was, when he was a junior, a world record holder as well. Now, those two riders clear. 13 seconds, hardly a winning gap yet, as they continue over the top of the climb. And the group behind are going to leave the majority of the chasing, I think, now to the Italians. They know that at some stage they will make a move. They have to make a move, because this is Italy.
The Italians will not let that group go off the front. They will fight as hard as they can to try and pull it back. Still, Marco Velo is on the front. You see, there's a bit strange this, because the Italians are trying to chase down, but it's the fact that they're on the climb at the moment that they don't have 3 or 4 riders at the front trying to organise a chase. They've sent Marco Velo up there to keep the tempo high, to make sure that on the slopes of this climb the advantage of the two leaders doesn't get too big. It's still hovering around the 15-second mark, and I think we'll take a few risks in the main field on the descent of the climb here to then try and pull them back into the fold. But now Robin has come to the front. He's looking very comfortable. A click of the arm there, just a swift indication to Alex Zula, come through now, I've done my turn at the front. It's now turn for you to put the hammer down as they come up to the summit of the climb. We'll now get an indication of just what sort of damage they've done to the main field behind.
Well, this is going to be a fine circuit next time around, because they've got to get across to reach them now. Here comes the counter-attacks from the field, and this little slight rise, and of course it's the Italians who are making the move again. Farazin trying to do something about it, over the top and flip down now, long fast descent. Alex Zula leading Jean-Cyril Robin. The clock giving us our time checks on the right, appropriately pasted by the colours of the rainbow jersey.
The main field is not very far behind at all, and there are not very many riders left in that group. Pascal Richard, I just caught a glimpse of there, was still riding. So is Mauro Gianetti. So today, in fact, the Italians and the Swiss are the ones who are there in the greatest of numbers. They've ridden the most perfect race so far, and they've managed to keep themselves high in numbers. And look at that, just 6 seconds to the chasing group. The chasing group is just 3 riders now trying to get across. There was an Italian in there who put the pressure on the last kilometre of the climb, but the main field is really not very far behind.
Well, there's a bit of a break there for Zula as he took a drink. Robin straight through on his inside. The 2 riders we expected to move soon, Jan Ullrich and Frankie Vandenbroucke, we haven't seen up near the action at all. They're certainly in that group and they're playing vigilante, but they're not come forward. Now this is a fast express coming across here now, and Celestino is the rider for Italy. But look at this, Paul. Camenzind, the defending world champion, could soon be in the frame.
Well, this is a great move by Switzerland. They're going to move this forward now. We'll have 2 Swiss riders in the leading group of 5. Now that is very good for the Swiss. And immediately Camenzind goes to the front. The reason he's done that is to show Alex Ullrich that he is there. And this, I think, has been the tactic of the day for Switzerland, to make the pace-making hard, make the race difficult, and then try and launch Oscar Camenzind into the group. But to get into a group with a teammate gives you an extra advantage.
Well, the Swiss are riding an absolutely brilliant race. They're building up a lead group here like the old Soviet Union cyclists used to do in their amateur days. And now they've got 2 riders up in this front group, including the very dangerous Oscar Camenzind, no longer an unknown after what has been a very solid season for him, although he's only won a couple of races.
The team that's missed out again is the Belgians. They should have had a man go across this group, because now they're going to be obliged to chase, because they've got to try and pull it back together for the man Frank Vandenbroucke. Also, Ullrich would have to start chasing on his own, because he's running out of teammates at the moment. A few more of the German riders have pulled out over the last lap, so he's used his team up to the maximum, and he's going to find himself having a very hard time, because these little groups that are going clear now, unless you go with everyone, it's very difficult to put yourself into a winning position.
Well, 4 nations up here, and that's a lot of riders behind who will no longer be chasing. So you're right, the Germans and the Belgians and the Dutch better start thinking things out and getting it together here, because clearly this group is not happy working together. And immediately now I think it's Camenzind who may have gone off the front.
Camenzind launched the attack off the front there, hoping to steal a few more seconds on the descent. This is the chance where you have of taking risks on the descent, where in the main field behind there may well not be some organisation or somebody prepared to take the risks on those corners. Looking back, there's a rider actually coming across the gap on his own there, but it's now an awful long way back to the main field.
And Alex, a bit shaky on the way down, Alex is, and he's just hanging off the back of this lead group as he turns on the way down to the hairpins. It's a very tortuous descent. Camenzind very happy, a smaller built bike rider, to lean on that bend and get round that corner very well indeed. There's the rider who's coming across the gap to the left, and we'll see if we can pick him out. It is in fact a Dutchman, and that's not surprising, and it could well be somebody on the Rabobank squad who's coming across that gap.
Well, they're trying to get themselves across. Rai Campion del Mundo is the message out from the spectators at the side of the road. That's the Italian television company who are bringing us these magnificent pictures here of the bike race. The Dutch obviously have seen the danger there, trying to launch somebody across the gap. But I can tell you one thing, he hasn't quite made the junction yet.
I think it's Den Bakker.
Could well be Maarten den Bakker. Difficult to see the quick glimpses we're getting as the leading group of 5 go underneath the trees on this very tricky fast descent off the slopes of the Torricelli. But it's a sensible move sending somebody across like that, because it takes responsibility away from the country once you have a man represented at the front. But look at this crowd, Phil. This is absolutely unbelievable. This is the heart of the world cycling.
Yeah, absolutely. And Perdiguero at the back here knows somebody is crossing the gap. He keeps looking over his shoulder to see what progress is like. And we're getting our bikes right through to the front again now. And we're finding Oscar Camenzind is saying, I've got the rainbow jersey and I'm going to keep it for another year, because he's riding superbly now. This is Chann McRae here, gritting his teeth, and he's got himself, I think it was Tafi on his wheel, but I tell you what, Chann is looking great right now. In fact, it's Johan Museeuw, the Belgian, who's got on the wheel of Chann McRae. Now, Chann, I think, took a flyer from the field and they've brought him back there. But he's created a reaction which I think he probably wanted, was to try and split this field up. But just look how tenacious they are today. The gaps come and they just concertina back up again. Oh, it has thinned out, Paul. That group's just gone round the corner.
Yeah, it's very difficult looking back now to see just exactly where the main field is, and there they are. Not very many guys left in that group now, but I think the rider trying to get across to the front actually had made contact, because I just thought I saw 6 riders in that leading group now, so we may well get a chance to see just which Dutch rider it was who's got up there. And in fact, there he is, wearing number 51, the man that we thought it was, Maarten den Bakker. So that will take responsibility away from the Dutch, and as you can see, the roles have changed, and at the front of the main group now, it's a Belgian responsibility to lead the charge. 30 seconds, so that's now looking pretty serious.
It is looking serious indeed, and the Belgians with Johan Museeuw riding second wheel there is going to feel a little bit worried about the way it's shaping up now, because they're getting too many rides at the front. There is now the composition, and Maarten den Bakker is the man to get on board again. And it looks as though the Dutch champion is enjoying things once more. So This is an interesting move now indeed, as we're heading out for the last couple of circuits now.
This is exactly what the Swiss wanted. They wanted to get themselves into a situation where Oscar Camenzind could get across to a move. I think it's an added bonus that he's got Alex Zuller there, because next time we get to the climb, what's going to happen is Alex Zuller will go to the front and set a real man's pace on the climb and try and open up the gap over the main field, because he knows there'll be an organised chase behind, and he knows it'll be coming from the Belgians, because he will have worked out the fact that the Italians are going to sit back now and leave the advantage to their man in the leading break at the moment.
And there's Johan Museeuw. He's been riding second for a while now, but he's trying to put things to rights a little bit here. Won't be easy. Peter van Petegem is the man setting the pace, and he probably have mixed thoughts now, chasing down Maarten den Bakker, I suppose.
It's always difficult when you go to the World Championships, but you are riding for your country, so you forget about trade teams, you forget about the guys that you race with for the rest of the year, which is why you have to take the responsibility of your own nation. That's why Van Petegem is at the front, chasing a man who for the majority of the season is his own teammate. But this, as they go through the feeding station now, is looking like a pretty serious move, especially having two Swiss riders in there. Camenzind leading them through there, taking his food on board. Mainly at this part of the race it will probably just be drinks, because that's the most important thing. It's difficult now to take on very much more solid food, because the race now is certainly on in earnest.
And the boys snatching their bags and bottles there perfectly. Always a dangerous preoccupation at this stage of the race.
There's not many guys left now in that main field. It certainly has been hammered down. There's Peter van Petegem on the front, Museeuw in second position there. Having a look back, there was Francesco Casagrande. Now this is a dangerous move, just letting the gap go like that. In fact, Oscar Camenzind has been taken off the back there by the Spanish rider, Pereguero, and that was a silly move. That's how to get caught out.
Well, I'm not sure what was going on there. Our cameras cut back. They had spotted it in the director's truck. As we go under the banner, 5.5 hours in the saddle now, so they're still looking for a couple of laps of racing here, which will keep them going well over 6 hours, even though the speed has been in excess of 40 kilometers an hour. And we're looking at the only little group of any note or any danger left on the course now that could threaten that small group just ahead. Watch the clock as they go over the line, because that's the time gap, and this group still very much in contention. But I think it's showdown time this lap, lads, because you're going to have to make something on the climb of the Torricelli this time up.
This is the time when you've really got to make the decisions. That's why you can see Peter Farrazijn is moving forward as well. On the front is Museeuw, then Van Petegem, then Peter Farrazijn. There is Vandenbroucke. He's got a little bandage on his nose. I'm not sure if that's one of those nose plasters to help your breathing, or if that's a subsequent to his crash earlier on, but he looked pretty comfortable there. A lot of Italians still in this group. 32 seconds now to the lead group, and now is the time when we really must see some action on the climb.
2 laps to go. Again, that little bell from the spectator, obviously near one of the microphones down on the ground, is not signalling the last lap. I should imagine it's louder to us, in fact, than it probably is to the cyclists. We're on lap 15 of 16 now, and this is the group which is trying to throw down the gauntlet. Maarten den Bakker read it well to come screaming across before the end of the lap to put a Dutchman in the breakaway. We've got 2 Swiss, a Frenchman, an Italian and a Spaniard. A lot of countries represented.
And the defending world champion wearing number 1, he's managed to get himself back into that group. A bit of consternation there between himself and the Spanish rider who let the gap go, and that's such a difficult thing to do when you've been on the bike for 5.5 hours and then close it down again. But there's a serious organised chase behind, and this time it's coming from the Belgians. They realise they've missed out. They realise they should have had a man in that leading group, and unfortunately it wasn't Johan Museeuw, because what a story that would be if Museeuw had got himself into this leading group, and we'd be looking at a second World Championships title, because he, to me, is one of the great bike riders of the 1990s, and what a way to go into the next century.
And a lot of people would have cheered with you had Museeuw. Well, I shouldn't write him off yet, because the race isn't decided. He still has a chance, although one feels that he'd be working for this one for Frankie Vandenbroucke. Who knows, as the riders continue now into the last 33 kilometres of this World Championship. Been a very difficult race for anybody to read, attack after attack of varying descriptions. The new champion of Latvia on the back there, Roman Sveinsteins, riding a quiet race now, Paul, and just sitting there, probably feels a little bit outnumbered, because he's not going to find any countrymen riding around him anymore.
Well, he's riding a sensible race too, because he doesn't have anyone left in the bike race to help him, and all he's hoping is that this bike race stays together, and if it does come down to the sprint, you better watch out for a clean pair of wheels.
Yeah.
This is the man that Belgium think can win today, Frank Vandenbroucke.
He never looks pained, does he? He always looks pretty cool when he rides along. He's clearly, well, he looks content with the way the race is going, but he's going to have to do something soon.
Looks pretty happy. He's leaving it all up to his teammates there. They're dedicated to just one man today. That's Frank Vandenbroucke, the revelation really this year. We've been waiting for Vandenbroucke to come through and get himself a big win, and the way he won Liège-Bastogne-Liège earlier in the season was in real Grandmaster style. He dominated the race and just rode away from it when he wanted. But these are the leading 6 at the moment, and a lot of work is being done in this leading group by the 2 Swiss riders, Alex Zülle and Oscar Camenzind. But look at the pressure on in the back here. This is the serious chase now. This is Peter Farazijn on the front, then it's Van Petegem, then Johan Museeuw. They're giving every last shot. Well, look at that big group of Italians sitting back. They're pretty content with the fact that they've got their man in the front at the moment, and they'll be just hoping it comes back together so they can launch the big counter-attack. But again, look at Vandenbroucke here, Phil. He's moving to the back of the group. He's really taking a lot of risks riding so far back in a group like that.
I don't think he's riding a very intelligent race at all, Paul. We know he's fallen off. As far as we know, he's not injured. He came back when his team waited for him and got him back in the race. He's not been to the doctor to our knowledge, and but he's not ridden this race like a man looking for the world title. The Belgians, and solely the Belgian team, who are trying to keep him in contention, are keeping that gap to just 24 seconds, and they're riding a brilliant race. But really, once Zülle and Camenzind went across, I would have expected to have seen Vandenbroucke go across with them, and then the race would have been over.
Certainly would. Moving to the front, Peter Farazijn, a big friend of Frank Vandenbroucke, who rides for the same trade team, the Cofidis team from the north of France, and he now is really putting the hammer down. He slipped back down the group there. Maybe he went to have a quick word with Vandenbroucke just to check on how his form was coming into the final 2 laps here. Inside 30 kilometers to go now to the finish, and we're now reaching the very early slopes of the climb for the penultimate time, and this is when you really have to have the hammer. This is when you really have to go for it at the World Championships, and if you're going to make the decision, it's usually on this lap and certainly on the next.
Well, this should be interesting this time up, and the crowd know it, of course, and somebody's just gone. It looks like Alex. Alex's legs have cracked. Well, he's had a brilliant day today, and I think he's done it totally unselfishly for Oscar Camenzind. If Camenzind wins, he'll know where to say thank you, because Alex has ridden a superb race, but those legs are not going to go up the Torricella on this penultimate lap.
Absolutely. Great bike rider, though. He rode himself until he popped, and he certainly has popped now. He's going to go back, and he'll probably go pretty rapidly past the main group as well. Camenzind realizing this is the time to open up. He's gone to the front, and he's the man solely setting the tempo on the front of this group. He's hoping now that he can build up the advantage. It was starting to come down because of the pressure of the Belgians, but the Belgians team are not so strong on the climb, and this may well be the advantage for the leading group now of 5 to reach that 1 minute mark.
Well, I know that when they see Zülle coming back to the pack, they'll feel pretty happy about that. As Mirko Celestino here, now thinking about things that might have to do. Jan Ullrich. Now, this had to happen this time, I think, and Ullrich, and Vandenbroucke has got his wheel as well. Boogerd has got behind, so the big guns have come to the front. This is all or nothing at this stage, I think. They've got to shut down that breakaway.
And also in there, very much in the action, is Chann McRae, just coming across there onto the back of the split. These are the big names. This is the big move by Jan Ullrich. He's got the power this year. He's got the World Championships time trial under his belt, and this is the one he wants. So he wants to wear the Arc-en-Ciel jersey for the next 12 months, and now is the time he needs to close down the gap. He has to do the work himself now, because there are no more German riders left in that group.
Well, we'll be probably seeing him in next year's Tour de France wearing the World Championship jersey in the time trials. Are we going to see him wear it every day of the road races as well? He made a big effort there, Paul, but he didn't shake them off, and he didn't look particularly good to me. He's gone back into 3rd place now, as Frank Vandenbroucke has now decided with a huge gear to try and get up there as well. And Casagrande taking full advantage of this, working in his favour.
And Zberg was moving up there too. The big pressure now, that really has split the group. which was already a fairly small group, but this is the action up at the back of the main group. You can see there going off the back was Van Petegem. His job has been done for the day, but Ullrich now realizes inside the last 30 k's he's got to close down that leading group of 5 because it is a dangerous point in the course. He doesn't need anybody to help him now because all everyone's trying to do is just hold on to his back wheel, as is Francesco Casagrande. Boogerd is in there, and in fact it looks as if Vandenbroucke has disappeared.
15 seconds they're saying it is now. That superb turn, that was Bakker sitting at the back there. Somebody has just thrown in an explosive, I think, amongst a lot of them now, because they're all over the place here. It's a desperate scramble up the Torricella this time, and the race could well be decided before we start the last lap if they keep this sort of pressure on. Ullrich is looking so determined there, but he's not getting away, but he is pulling away the select group of riders.
I have to say, in fact, Vandenbroucke was under difficulty there. He was actually just popping off the back there, but managed to recover and came back up to the group that Ullrich was with. And also getting onto the back of that group of riders is Chann McRae. Just at the back there, you can see the Star-Spangled Banners on his shoulders. He's having a great ride because he was in the early action as well. But Ullrich now, a big powerhouse. He's doing all of the work. He's done the damage he wanted to. He's isolated everybody else. There's a Spanish rider's got into this leading group as well now. This is the big counter-attack. They have to keep the hammer on the slopes of the climb of the Torricelli to try and pull back the leading group of 5.
Well, Chann, buddy of Lance Armstrong, is coming good at the end of the season. A brilliant Vuelta de España when he finished 19th overall and looked good all the way to the end. He's now in at the kill here. All of his team are now in the pits watching the race on television, and no doubt because Americans support Americans cheering on Chann McRae. He has made a great move here and looks good because this is hammer down time, and Jan Ullrich is looking for no help here as he just drives this race on.
It's down to 4 men at the front. Somebody else has been dropped from that leading group, and there in fact is Jan Ullrich. He's done all of the work himself. He's pulled it back, and before the summit of the climb he'll have the rest of the breakaway group in his grasp. On the back there is Maarten den Bakker. Just in front of him is Jean-Cyril Robin, and here is the big German train. Jan Ullrich has not asked anybody for any help at all. Right on his wheel there, wearing 28, is Casagrande.
Watch out for Konyshev too, Paul. He's in there. Here comes Chann. I think it was Perdigiro who went, the Spanish rider, who was in trouble at the front. I haven't seen him recently.
Strangely enough, there are not many of the big Spanish names in the Spanish team for the World Championship this year. Alano not able to take part because of injury. The biggest known name really has to be Manuel Beltran, who's no longer in the event. He's a long way back.
Yeah.
Moving
and of
forward
course
there.
We've got the very aging Melchior Mauri now, who's been a brilliant cyclist. Still is a top time trial rider. To give him justice, he's riding for the Portuguese teams at the moment.
In this leading group, the Spanish rider wearing 92 is Oscar Freire. Can't say I know very much about him.
Well, he's a first-year pro, he's second-year pro, and he's never done much racing at all year.
Attacked by Vandenbroucke. Now Vandenbroucke coming off the front. Now what a great move by Vandenbroucke. He's let the Belgians do all of the work at the bottom of this climb. He launched the first attack, but then as soon as Jan Ullrich saw that he wasn't going anywhere, he noticed that he could get himself across there. But now getting towards the summit, VDB has decided he'll have a go.
Well, we saw him do this in the Vuelta de España, where he helped himself to a couple of stages, and on the very last day he ran out the winner of the race on points. He was in tremendous form there, and he really started that race not expecting to finish it. And now he's trying to make his move, but clearly a marked man, because here comes Michael Boogerd gritting his teeth and will fight his way across. He's taking across a very vigilant Francesco Casagrande, who is watching everything, and Ullrich still there on the shoulder of Casagrande, and so too Chann McRae sitting in there as well, and Jean-Cyril Robin is sitting on the back of this group now.
Well, that's a big attack by Frank Vandenbroucke, big gear as well over the summit, but you could see Ullrich was not letting anybody go. Ullrich's going straight through there, and I think in the back of his mind he's going to put the hammer down and keep going.
Well, they're over the top of the Torricella for the penultimate time, and that really caused a few riders to grit their teeth. But once more, a rider could not break the tenacity of the rest, and Vandenbroucke is going to be hauled back in. The lead group here is falling to bits right now. That looks like Den Bakker gone over with Camenzind. Here comes the chase group now reforming at the front, and still showing really no indication, Paul, as to who's going to be the world champion with something like 20 kilometres left to go.
Absolutely not, but we've had a fairly good filtration at the front of the pack with all the big names going out on the attack. Oscar Camenzind was looking pretty seriously like a favourite there, and as you get a chance to see what that final climb did, the damage at the top. Oscar Camenzind again wearing number 1, the defending champion, moving up. Dmitri Konyshev looking pretty happy about the situation at the moment. He too doesn't have very many teammates left in this bike race, but he's certainly now
not in the front group.
certainly now is in with a chance, because he's been very close to the gold medal at the World Championships. In fact, getting very close to Greg LeMond, finishing second in Chambéry. This is Ullrich now coming across, but this group now, Phil, is a very serious group. The Italians have got the man in this group that they wanted, Francesco Casagrande there in 5th position. Chann McRae is a great surprise for the Americans. I think they'll be pretty happy with the performance he's putting in towards the end of this season, and it's great to see after a very difficult start in the pro ranks that he's now riding on a very good top squad. The McRae team, one of the best teams in the world, and I think we'll see Chann McRae getting a lot of recognition for this performance he's putting in today.
And deserves it too. This has been a tough race to read right, and there's been nobody being able to sham off here. You've had to be very vigilant and be prepared to cross the gaps as they've opened, because this has been a quick race today. And Dmitri Konyshev, who said it was going to be his last season, I think he's having second thoughts at the moment, but he's trained specifically to win this World Championship because he lives in Italy, and he would be the first Russian to do so if he could get his hands on the on the rainbow jersey rather. But we'll see, because he's in this final selection at the moment.
2 Italians in the leading group as well. The man they've all wanted to get there, Francesco Casagrande, and also still in there, Mirko Celestino, riding a very good race. He was also in a lot of the early action. The lead group now has a lead of 25 seconds over the chasers, and it's going to be very difficult to pull it back because a lot of tired bodies in this bike race. There's Jan Ullrich in the new German strip, blue and white. Vandenbroucke now being a lot more attentive. He's obviously pretty happy with the situation because this race literally exploded on that climb there. And we've got all the big names now coming to the front. There's Michael Boogerd. The Dutch will be happy. I don't think there's any nation can be very unhappy about the position of their leaders, because they're all in this leading group now and all the big names are in the group. Surprised really to see Dmitri Konyshev, because he's looking really towards the end of his career and a very canny rider as well. If they don't watch out coming down to the final sprint, he's the kind of guy who could spring the major surprise.
Looks to be about 10 or 12 riders here now. Italians are still fairly represented. This is Konyshev. And just going through there was Robin. Robin's ridden an excellent race today, and also Marcus Zberg, a Swiss rider, is now through. There he is, number 12. Well, if it comes down to a sprint now, Paul, Zberg could well make it 2 in a row for Switzerland, because he packs the finish.
Absolutely, but watch out for the final climb. That's when somebody like Frank Vandenbroucke has to put the big attack in. Vandenbroucke on the far side there, looking very comfortable here, wearing number 25. He really has risen to the occasion today. The whole of the Belgian team this morning, Phil, were dedicated to just this one man. Yep. It's a risky thing to do, but Vandenbroucke is so full of class, it's unbelievable.
And he's waited and waited, gambled on all of the attacks, and now when it matters, he's right there. And so too is this young man here, Chann McRae, a little bit outnumbered to say the least. He needs to ride a very clever race now and make the most of the strength of the others and try and leave something for the finish, and he could get a medal. There's the remnants of the field trying to scrape 6 men back into the action.
2 Swiss riders in that group as well. The Swiss have had a great race today. They really have been one of the dominant nations this year in the World Championships, but it's going to be very difficult to chase down because nobody really wants to catch this leading group of 10 riders because it has all of the favourites in there. There is Vandenbroucke, followed by McRae. Moving up there is Konyshev. Nardello is in that group of 6 riders who's chasing behind.
So under what is the 2 kilometre to go banner here, but not this time around. We're still 18 kilometres from the finish, as looking over his shoulder is Michael Boogerd. This is a very interesting little group now. Jan Ullrich is here, but the thing is, Paul, all of the pre-race favourites, if you like, are in this group, you know, and that sometimes doesn't work to the advantage of the breakaway because they start watching them too easily.
For the moment, they all seem to be working. Nobody's sitting on the group. There's an attack going now. It looks like one of the Italians. If it is, that will be Celestino. It is Celestino. He's obviously decided he's going to put pressure on the rest of this group. Coming across after him is one of the Swiss riders. That's probably Marcus Zberg. Now this is a dangerous moment because everybody's going to start watching each other, because they're all in the back of their minds now thinking that the most tactical part of the course to attack is on the final climb of the day, and they don't want to put any effort in now.
Through the pits, nobody taking food this time around now because they're paying attention to the attack here. And Celestino has started the attack. Jan Ullrich is here. This is an interesting move now because Ullrich is looking very, very strong indeed. The rider going through there is Oscar Freire, the little-known Spanish rider who's only had, by the way, I think it's 11 days of racing this year because he was injured way out in February. Has hardly turned the pedal. I'm just beginning to wonder why, in fact, they selected him.
Picked at the last moment by the selectors. In fact, he was a medalist at the World Championships before in the Under-23 World Championships in San Sebastian. He got a silver medal, so he's no stranger to the World Championships. And obviously, because of the fact, it seems to me as if the Spanish had a hard time picking the team this year, because a lot of the major names were either injured or not in good enough form towards the end of the season. But this is serious now because Jan Ullrich has got himself into a good situation. The group of just 4 riders, who's going to chase him? Frank Vandenbroucke needs to come to the front and put some pressure on. It looks as if that's just what he's doing now.
So the break is split, but as you can see, not by very much. It'll be the bell this time around. Probably the spectator won't bother to ring it now, but we'll hear the real one, that's for sure, as they keep looking over the shoulder to see, is it worth pushing on with this attack? I would have thought it was, because to get an advantage before the climb of the mountain could be a big one, especially for somebody like Oscar Freire, who is a rider with no reputation here, and he's finding himself in a very select group of stars. There's the real bell, and the race now on its final 16-kilometre lap, and the time 5 hours and 56 minutes. So with the time being around 24 minutes a lap, Paul, we're going to finish in about, well, 24 minutes from now.
Approximately. Pretty good guess, Phil. Well done. In fact, that group of 6 riders has just got back on there, so Daniel Nardello must have dragged himself back into the bike race here as well. So there's been a swelling in the group here, and it's now gone from 10 riders to around about 16.
Well, they obviously regrouped just round the back of the circuit coming off the Torricelli there. And now Jan Ullrich looking at everybody, the last surviving German cyclist in this breakaway, and without doubt the most talented for sure, a brilliant winner of the Tour of Spain. And before that, of course, he's had 2 seconds and a win in the Tour de France. In between all the controversy of eating too many cream cakes, he seems to have got rid of that allergy right now, and he's looking absolutely awesome.
I reckon Jan Ullrich's going to be pretty dangerous next year as well, because finishing off the season in good form will be good for him, because recently with his Tour de France performances, in fact, he's ended up packing up the season just after the Tour de France and had 4 or 5 months without enough activity. So now he'll only have about a month off, and then he'll be training again, so he should be a great Jan Ullrich next season. Well, that group behind had Rolf Sorensen in there, and still these guys at the front are the serious contenders for victory, because they group behind still at 35 seconds, but they don't seem to be organised at all.
No, there's a lot of people looking for somebody else to do the work here now. I was just thinking then, Paul, with the absence of Lance Armstrong, who chose not to ride after his Tour de France win, we really didn't expect to cheer an American on towards a crown, but just look at this. Chann McRae, who comes from the same area as Lance, is flying the flag absolutely brilliantly here.
He certainly is. Big buddies. They both went to school together in Plano, Texas. They've had a very similar career, except to have to say that Chann has had a difficult career, turning professional early on for a small Spanish team called Santa Clara. In fact, he's still fighting them in court to try and get his wages, and I'm very happy that he's managed to get himself across to a top team like the McRae team, because they've actually managed to look after him this year, brought him up to form, put him in the Tour of Spain at the end of the season, and that has proved to be a great preparation for the World Championships, and he's now in at the kill of the World Championships with some of the best bike riders in the world.
And he packs a finish. It just depends how, as they're probably all thinking now, how they're going to get over the last climb of the Torricelli, which will be a torrid climb for all of them. I think it'll be a case of close your eyes, grit your teeth, and hope you're with the leaders over the top, because this is going to be tough right now.
There've got to be, and there has to be an attack. Francesco Casagrande must be thinking about the fact that he's flying the flag for Italy. He's going to have a hard time if he leaves it down to the final sprint, so he certainly must have a go on the climb. Jan Ullrich has been very aggressive on the flat part of the course in between the descent and the bottom of the climb here, as we now see the riders going through 14 kilometers to go. Ullrich doesn't seem to be that confident of his ability to blow everybody away on the climb. I think he's trying to get clear on the flat part in between.
Well, I wonder just how tired he is. There's the gap. That should be a winning gap right now, as Konyshev will have seen it first, followed by Jan Ullrich. I'll just give you the other names in this breakaway: Vandenbroucke, Camenzind, Chann McRae, Robin, Casagrande, Marcus Zberg is in there, the Spanish rider Oscar Freire, and also Daniele Nardello. That's the composition of the group, just a handful of seconds ahead of a chase being led the last time we saw it by Andrea Tafi.
It'll be very difficult, this final climb, because a lot of these riders are aggressive riders. They're good climbers as well, and they will be looking at a possibility of an attack on the final climb. Jean-Cyril Robin moving to the back of the group now, getting a little bit of a breather. He too is a pretty excellent climber. To finish in the top 10 of the Tour de France, you have to be a good climber. He's looking back to see what the position is behind, to see what kind of reaction is coming, and he wants to see if his team manager can come forward, Charlie Berard, who himself has been in situations like this at World Championships. But for Jean-Cyril Robin, the best chance he has got is launching an attack on the climb. And that must be going through everybody's mind right now. But they all know, and they're all wondering who's going to be the first to go.
Well, this is Ullrich just doing enough now to keep the pace high. Camenzind doing a lot of work here, the defending world champion, and riding an excellent race. Chann McRae never far away from the action, as again Camenzind tries to open a little gap here and see who's willing to follow. Well, Casagrande it is who starts the... No, yes, it is Casagrande who starts the reaction. Oh, and this is the retirement down at the start-finish line. So as he came through, Alex Zuller has decided to throw in the towel after being dropped last time up. But he played a great part in making sure Casagrande was in there with a real chance, and also Zberg now.
Great bike race by Alex Zuller today. He's done a very good job for Switzerland, and the Swiss have got to be pretty happy with the situation right now, because Oscar Camenzind is looking in excellent condition. He should be able to attack on the climb, and then that would put the advantage on the shoulders of Marcus Zberg, because if this group comes down to the line together, Marcus Zberg has to be the fastest rider. He's a great bunch sprinter, and he survived the World Championships. All he has to do now is drag his body over this climb.
Oscar Freire, he seemed to be asking the way. I thought he'd know that by now, because he's on the 16th circuit. This young man, injured in February, I think it was in Mallorca, and has been a long time getting back into the sport. But he had a phone call not long before these championships from the manager saying, would he like to ride them? And he said yes. And look at this, he's in the leading group here, and with some very good riders, by the way.
Some seriously good bike riders. Chann McRae now taking up the 10th position in this group, sitting at the back there, thinking about what he's going to do on this final climb. Well, one thing, Oscar Freire is not worried too much about coming to the front of this group, despite the fact that he's got some of the biggest, best bike riders in the world with him. He's doing his share of the pacemaking. Jan Ullrich is using a huge gear there. He's really rolling it over, and he must be thinking back now as we turn very closely to the bottom of the climb about when he's going to attack, because I think he has to attack this group if he wants to win the bike race today.
Well, we topped the Torricelli more or less midway around the circuit, and there's a bit of a chunk going downhill, and we gradually run into Verona, which is only 60 metres above sea level. The riders will have to decide this on the climb. Otherwise, I feel confident they will hand this race across to the sprinter Marcus Zberg. And Chann McRae has got to play his cards right, and he really can get a medal here. He looks good, Paul. He's always riding near the front of the group. I don't think he's so happy on the climb, but he settles down and very quickly once over the top of it.
Well, it's a big group now. Ullrich zigzagging across the road, waiting to see if anybody's going to launch the attack. He's not in an ideal position himself to attack. He's riding at the front. He's riding this the same way he would ride the cols at the Tour de France, waiting to see if anybody's going to challenge him. Moving to the back now, Mirko Celestino. He's had a great bike race this afternoon. I think the only thing left for him in the race this afternoon is really to try and prepare the terrain for Francesco Casagrande, who's moved up there into second place. But watch out for Konyshev, Phil, because if it does come down to the sprint, he really does pack it, especially on a big occasion like this. He too may well be able to cause the big surprise of this World Championships and getting himself a Russian World Championships title.
Well, we'll see, but they're now at the nervous stage. The selection they feel may have been made here now, so now they're having to rethink their tactics as they head up towards the top of the Torricelli for the last time. And just see what happens. This is Zberg on the front now, setting a nice tempo. Casagrande surely isn't going to let this run down to a sprint.
He dare not, he cannot, he has to do something on the climb. He's got to attack if he wants to split this group. Oscar Camenzind is moving to the back. He's allowing Zberg to set the tempo at the front. Zberg is setting that tempo just to try and discourage any attacks, because he wants to keep the group compact, because he knows he's got it when it comes down to the sprint at the end. But the reason Camenzind has gone to the back is so that he can see if anybody else in this group is thinking about launching an attack. And I reckon the attack has to come from Frank Vandenbroucke, who's currently lying halfway down the group.
Now, they know the attack's going to come on this climb. This is where they must launch the attack. We're getting onto the steeper slopes now, the last kilometre and a half of this climb up to the summit. 11 kilometres from the finish. We go over the top of the climb then in a couple of K's time. And Zberg is waiting for the move. He knows it's going to come. These guys are almost queuing up to launch an attack here.
Very nervous. Everybody's nervous. You can see by the way they're out of the saddle. Robin is the man to go. Jean-Cyril Robin from the Française de Jeu, today riding for France, has decided this is the terrain. I'm a climber. I finished in the top 10 of the Tour. I've got to go. This would be a big surprise, because I don't think the French were expecting a title today.
And Chann McRae there looks as though he's having to force the reaction. I would have tempted to, if I'd have been Chann, to have let somebody else do that, because he knows that they're going to have to do it, as he's the only man from the US team there. But he's gone to set the pace a little bit, and now he's falling back down the outside, because there's plenty of riders willing to take up the chase, and Chann's going to have to grit his teeth now and hang on to the back. Camenzind followed by Ullrich. The big guns trying to hunt down Jean-Cyril Robin, and then behind them is Casagrande, very vigilant and still waiting, still hasn't gone for it.
Casagrande is going to wait, I think, to the final kilometre. He's allowing Jan Ullrich now to do all of the pacemaking on the front to pull back this attack by Jean-Cyril Robin. Robin has really gone. He's actually opened up a pretty serious gap. He's got a big gear in now, and looking back, look at that though. Ullrich has done it. He's absolutely closed the gap down, and I think Jean-Cyril Robin has put out the white flag.
This man with his 4-star fuel in his legs, nobody's helped him. He's used a massive amount of strength. This was the attack that came but a kilometre earlier. A quick acceleration, no reaction until this man got to the front and stamped on those pedals. Nobody helped him, and he's put Robin back in his place.
What a beast Ullrich is today. He's going for the win today, but it's going to be difficult because he's doing too much work. He's always on the front. He's the man who's chasing down all of these attacks. He needs to save something and try and launch an attack of his own to get clear of the rest of the group. Still, Casagrande is sitting there in second place. It's as if he's waiting for the moment to attack, but he's not confident in himself. Vandenbroucke now looking around in the group. He too
doesn't look like a man going to attack, does he?
He looks a bit strange on the bike too. Maybe he's got a few problems from that crash he had earlier, but he certainly now is not looking as comfortable as he did earlier on. Ullrich though is always in #1 position, happy to keep the pacemaking on, and again this is a surprise. In fact, I think Michael Boogerd has been dropped from the group, which is a major surprise, Phil, because he was looking so strong and so confident, and he's actually slipped off the back. Ullrich still on the front, still setting the pressure. If anybody was going to get dropped from this group, I would not have put down the name Michael Boogerd. That's a major surprise. Vandenbroucke now is 3 from the back. Chann McRae is still very happy. He's now looking at a top 9 position here, because there are only 9 bike riders left at the front. Oscar Freire now going through on his wheel. Macus Zberg, he's the most dangerous man in the group, because he can blow every man in this group away in the sprint. He's able to win bunch sprints, and in a small group like this, I reckon he's untouchable.
Well, every man in this group, Paul, we've talked about, mentioned for a couple of seasons now, but I don't think I've ever seen or commentated on Oscar Freire before. And this man is in this group with the elite cyclists and looking really strong in there. I doubt whether half of these riders even know who he is. Maybe Ullrich spotted him in some of the early season races in Spain, but then I doubt whether he would have picked him out of a big bunch either. But Freire has read this race perfectly today, and as far as I know, this is about his 12th day of racing this season, and he's in with all this quality of bike rider.
He's the most inexperienced of the whole group here. He only has 1 victory in his career, and that was a small stage race, the Castilla-Leon in 1998. But Ullrich is trying to ride everybody off his wheel here. He's trying to just blow the race to pieces. He doesn't seem to have the acceleration required to launch a vicious attack, which is why he hopes that the power he's got in his legs will blow everybody apart.
Looks to me as though Vandenbroucke is in a spot of trouble there. He's allowed the door to open. There's a gap formed. He's closed it down now, but he's not riding as well as we thought he would at this stage. This is the sort of terrain that Vandenbroucke would have... Well, having said that, Paul, there he goes up the outside, so perhaps I'm wrong. He's moved smoothly up on the shoulders of Oscar Freire now, and he's looking for that wheel. Freire has let the gap open a little bit there, because this is Ullrich again, and this might be his swan song here. He's turned the power on once more. What a fine piece of cycling by Ullrich, but here comes Vandenbroucke now, and Ullrich has kicked again to get on the Vandenbroucke's wheel. Camenzind's gone through. He picks a good wheel to follow, and Casagrande in there as well. That was a real sprint for the summit. Now they've got to keep it going.
Camenzind has seen the danger straight onto the wheel of Vandenbroucke, and the reaction, oh, it's so hard for Jan Ullrich there. You can see him digging deep. He realises he's done all of the work. He wasn't expecting somebody to come over the top of him, but when your name is Frank Vandenbroucke and all of Belgium is expecting you to be the new Eddy Merckx, you have to come to the front of the World Championships and attack. Vandenbroucke will be happy with this, but they haven't got the big gap. In fact, it's been closed down once again by Jan Ullrich. Ullrich is doing all of the work in this group.
He's really not riding with great intelligence, if you ask me, because really, it looked like Boogerd had been tailed off there, but really, he should make others do the chasing as well. But he doesn't seem to be able to alter his pace at all. But there we are, and Camenzind is riding a brilliant race. That was a glimpse of the back group, by the way, that contains Andrea Tafi. We'll get back up to the leaders. They've regrouped here. Vandenbroucke slipped to the back, with Chann McRae is last man just now. Vandenbroucke having a drink. And still Jan Ullrich nearly at the front this time, riding on the wheel of Oscar Camenzind. But I was saying there, Paul, that Camenzind, 1 year away from being a surprise world champion, is now riding like a world champion.
Absolutely, and with a great chance of a win as well. But I think now, the fact that he didn't get away on the climb, you see him setting the pace at the front. He's now going to try and keep this group together as tightly compact as possible, because he realises his chances of victory now are going, but the chance are still on the Swiss team, because their man Marcus Zberg packs a great sprint, and he's now going to have to change from being the leader of the team to being the domestique and prepare the sprint for their man at the finish when it comes down to it, Marcus Zberg.
Right, and also number 103 there, Konyshev, he packs a bit of a finish if he's got the legs left after 260 kilometres of what has been an excellent World Championship. I've never been somebody to support the World Championships being held so late in the year, when all of these riders in this breakaway are either unknown or they've been out half the season with injury or illness or whatever, which to me doesn't lead to a great World Championship. But I have to say, this has been a superb race.
Absolutely, and all the big names from the end of the season are at the front of the bike race. It's great, though, to see Chann McRae. A little word from Jan Ullrich there saying, come on, move to the front. You have to do your share of the work. And Chann's probably saying, sorry, mate, you're the big star. I'm just here for the ride, thank you very much. You have to get rid of me.
Yeah, I was only 19th when you won the Tour of Spain, so you go back up to the front. That's the way to treat him, Chann. As it comes down to the finish, Chann might have a better finish than Jan, actually.
Could well do, but it's surprising to see that nothing really has come from Francesco Casagrande. I think he's really been a little on the limit. He's happy to be in the leading group, but he didn't have the legs to attack over the top of the climb there, and that is not going to bode well for the finish, because he's not the greatest sprinter in the group. And at the moment, everybody still seems to want to work and still wants to get themselves down to the finish line, and they're not thinking about trying to attack and get off the front.
Well, they didn't break anything on that climb, and now they're going to have to wonder what on earth are they going to do here. Camenzind has slipped to the back to plan his next move. Vandenbroucke has gone back into what has been his position in this race, near the back of the groups. He's done just enough to get across to when it matters, but he still doesn't seem to be riding like the man who had that magical form at the end of the Tour of Spain just a recent few days ago, or a few weeks ago. And this is the lead group. Nobody's going to get across here to them now. One Frenchman up here, Robin, one American in Chann McRae, one Spanish rider in Oscar Freire.
Two Swiss riders, Oscar Camenzind and Marcus Zberg, a very good sprinter. To me, if nobody attacks, that man there wearing number 12, Phil, is the man who's going to be the world champion in just around about 5 kilometres time, because he is so fast when it comes down to the sprint, and he's got a teammate there who can help him out over the last kilometre. McRae now moving up to the front. Oscar Freire, the Spanish rider, in second position. Jan Ullrich, omnipresent at the front of this group, is looking very strong. But for Jan Ullrich to win this bike race, he would have to have a very long, fast sprint. And I don't think it's going to be like that today. I think it's going to be a short 300, 350 metre sprint.
And the one man we didn't see get dropped, but he went, and that was Medico Celestino, which reduced the Italians by 50% in this league group. We just have these 9 left now. You saw the names just then. And this is Konyshev gone through to the front now, riding probably his last World Championship, an ambition to ride well, and he's done just that.
Who knows, after a great performance at the end of the season, he may well go on to do just one more year, keep himself away from the big stage races, but certainly specialise on the one-day classics. Camenzind, last year's winner, sitting at the back of the group there, must be thinking, well, 12 months ago I was the man who walked away with it, and today I've put in a great performance. I've defended my title exceptionally well, and we're still in with a chance of taking the title back to Switzerland.
Well, I don't know if you saw then Vandenbroucke flick his right arm asking for somebody to come through, but he forgot to wait for the somebody to catch him up, and he was well clear there, but I think he's back together again now. Look at that crowd now, treated to the big finish. Only one Italian in with a shout at the end of a massive sprint here of 9 riders. Chann McRae now opening up, being trailed by Dmitri Konyshev. Well, if I was Chann, I'd hide a little bit longer, because there's a lot of riders still willing to race here in this group. And Chann is isolated, don't forget.
This is a good move, because what may happen behind is you get the big nations actually starting to watch each other, and everybody forcing Jan Ullrich to do the chasing. And in fact, that's exactly what Ullrich has done. He's chased them down once again. He's doing so much work. I don't see him in with a chance at all of winning the championship today, because he's just been working his heart out all over the last 2 laps, being forced because of his isolation to do all of the work and control the bike race. But it looks as if Casagrande has decided this man is the man to watch, because he's always in the shadow of Jan Ullrich.
Well, the next attack could be the last one, because we're running into the town of Verona to end a marvellous week of World Championship cycling that's produced some great champions, and the winner today is going to be a great champion, because this is a very select group indeed. All of the riders getting into this group by sheer strength and willpower, because you've had to work hard to be in the selection today in this world title. No lucky moves at all. Dmitri Konyshev looking over his shoulder, 33 and a half years of age, and thinking of retiring, and still riding at the front of a world championship. 1989 he finished second to Greg LeMond and ahead of Sean Kelly. That was the world title Kelly said he should have won, and he didn't. Now Chann McRae, another American who might get the better of Dmitri Konyshev at the end, and now comes the attack. It had to come sooner or later, not quite where we expected it, but Casagrande is gone.
Well, Casagrande has been waiting. He's been sitting at the front of the group in 2nd or 3rd position all of the time, as if he was waiting for the right moment, and it's a surprise to see it on the flat here, but he may well have hit them just at the right time. He's got the gap, but the reaction has come behind.
No, they came after it. I don't know what Konyshev said to himself there just before the attack came, but I think he wasn't expecting to be quite so quick going past him. Now he's been caught by Chann McRae, and Casagrande said to immediately come on through, but Chann didn't want to go through, and I don't blame him for that, as Camenzind goes now.
Camenzind is gone. The Spanish rider Oscar Freire is right on his wheel, and I'm sure when we do see a reaction come from behind, again it's going to be Jan Ullrich who has done the lion's share of the work in this group here. Oscar Freire has gone to the front. He's looking over his shoulder saying to Camenzind, come on, you've got number 1 on your bike, you keep the pressure on.
Well, Oscar Freire, we don't know anything about him, but he knows how to ride a bike race. We do know he got the silver medal a couple of years ago in the under-23. That was his swan song as an amateur. Now, of course, a professional rider. Again, they've left it to Ullrich to hunt down the leaders. Nobody helping him. He's given so much energy down to chasing back today, Jan Ullrich. But here we've got Camenzind, last year's world champion, defending now, looking like a good one, as he's got himself a strange but very strong rider with him in Oscar Freire.
Pretty serious move that as well. Reaction now coming from Jean-Cyril Robin. Jan Ullrich has said, sorry guys, I'm not going to chase everything down. It's up to you now to do a little work at the front. Oscar Freire is in 1st position, but again the attack coming from Camenzind, and just coming across the gap now is Dmitri Konyshev and Jean-Cyril Robin.
Oh, and Oscar Freire didn't really want, Camenzind didn't really want to take up the lead there, but he's committed now, I think. They've jumped on him, and Robin is the man who's chased them down. Chann McRae of the United States goes to the right now. He's gone at 950 metres from the line. That seems a bit early to me. I don't know where Oscar Camenzind has found his legs from, but he's come out of there and has jumped again onto Chann. I think this is a mistake by Chann, Paul.
Well, it was one last chance. It was just a hope to try and surprise everybody. There's been a flurry of attacks there, but now Oscar Camenzind is thinking about one thing, keeping the group together, making sure that they go down in one compact group to the finish line, because this is the chance for the big man. In fact, there's the Spanish rider Freire has gone down the outside.
Did you see the line swing to the left, and they all follow Chann McRae, and Oscar Freire is shot to the right, and there's nobody reacted. This is how Medico Celestino won the Hughes Classic this year in Hamburg. They didn't react in time, and I think they've just handed a world title to a Spanish rider, and that is going to be a turn up for the Bucks. They're all going to say Oscar who, but he's taken it, and he's taken it extremely well. This man, barely 23 years of age, is the champion of the world. Oscar Freire wins the world title. Zberg gets what he will think probably should have been a gold medal, as he takes silver, and I think that was Jean-Cyril who took third. But just watch this now, Paul.
Absolutely unbelievable. There's Chann McRae leading them around the corner. The work there had been done by Oscar Camenzind. He nailed them back. Coming from almost the back position, Oscar Freire surprises everybody because they've made a big effort there to go and get Chann McRae. McRae takes him across to the left-hand side of the road, and nobody reacts behind.
Well, nobody can say this man was a lucky world champion. I defy them to say that, because he has ridden very, very well all day. He had the advantage of not being known by the group, but my goodness me, where did he find those legs? Look at this. A silver medal in the under-23 Worlds, one win previously as a pro. This is the end of his second season as a pro, and I think the 12th day of cycling for him today this year. And it just shows you, they always did say that training made you tired, Paul, so perhaps you need a rest to win a world title.
Well, nobody can say that he's a lucky winner, because you have to be a tough guy to be in at the kill after 262 kilometres and 6 hours 20 minutes in the saddle. He moved just exactly at the right moment. He let the big guys fight it out amongst themselves, and he hit them hard, and when he hit them he never looked back. He knew immediately this was his only chance, and once he got the gap of 30 or 40 yards, they all started to look who's going to take up the chase. Nobody took up the chase, and that's how you win a bike race.
Well, when you get results like that, I'm not surprised that this year Spanish cycling has become the number 2 best sport, most watched sport in Spain behind football, because they haven't seemed to miss the loss of Miguel Indurain at all. There's the result. Oscar Freire Gomez, to give him his full family name, Marcus Zberg second, Jean-Cyril getting a very good bronze medal there for France. Casagrande will be disappointed with 4th for Italy, but even so, the Italians were always in the frame. Konyshev only 9th, Johan Museeuw in there at 12th, and by the way, Jan Ullrich got the 8th place finish and did an awful lot of work to boot. Some big names trailing in behind a man we've never mentioned in the past, but I'm sure we're going to mention him in the future. Oscar Freire Gomez will now go on to the big races this season, wearing the white jersey and the rainbow stripes around it as champion of the world. He can't possibly have believed it. Phoned home to ride the World Championships by his team manager, who must have known something that nobody else knew, not even this young man, because surely he never started today thinking he would become a world champion by the end of it, some 6 hours and 20 minutes later. The president of the Union Cycliste Internationale, Hein Verbruggen, putting the gold medal round a Spanish cyclist. Oops, wrong way round, he says. Well, he may be a new world champion, Paul, but he knows which way to put the medals on.
He certainly does. It's not the first World Championships medal he's had, as you said there, but what a regret, I would think, for Marcus Zberg, because he should really have controlled the race a little more with his teammate Oscar Camenzind towards the end there, but they couldn't do anything when that big hit came from Oscar Freire, and Marcus Zberg must be thinking how close he has come to putting himself on the top step of that podium.
Well, Marcus Zberg will have to live with that, because the rainbow jersey on the shoulders of Oscar Freire Gomez next season, and I'm sure you will find he was not a lucky winner of this World Championship. He deserved the gold medal. I hope you've enjoyed this great title race. On behalf of World Cycling Productions and Paul Sherwin, I'm Phil Liggett saying goodbye to you all.